the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 374. UN women, all your nations are belong to us. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren B. might not be here yet, and we don't know if she is unable to be here. Sometimes she gets stuck in traffic. So we hopefully Nonsense Annihilator Lauren B. will be here shortly. But if not, we do have Mike Stevenson, the personification of perceptivity, our own Dr. Random McCam, who likes to tell you he's not a real doctor, but I don't know. I think he might be better than what...
I'm not even a real perceptor of perceptivity. Sorry to break the illusion, but whatever.
Nah, I think you might be better than real doctors. I've gotten better medical advice from you than real doctors of late.
I cannot confirm this without breaking YouTube terms of service, I'm afraid.
Oh, I know. But in any case, so we also have the Doge in charge in the background, making things happen that I still haven't taken the time to figure out how to make happen. But I am stepping into the 21st century now. I just replaced my computer. I haven't gotten it set up yet for the show because I have like 12 years worth of stuff that I got to transfer from this old computer. When you let your equipment get really outdated, one of the drawbacks of that is if I buy, say, a drive to transfer everything to from the hard drives on the desktop computer that I have that is so old that I can't upgrade from System 8, they won't work with it. It won't run the drivers. So I have to have an older drive because the newer equipment will work with some of the older drives. I have to go through and possibly even try attaching the laptop directly to the computer instead of attaching a hard drive because it's been a pain in the butt. I've tried with two and it won't boot them up because it's too old and they're too new.
Why do we even need Windows 11? Like, are there going to be viruses that only target Windows 10 and below? I don't think so. That's not how viruses work. They specifically attack the latest technology. So why do we need Windows 11? Is it because Windows 10 or below would just stop working for a particular fucking reason? I hate you all.
Yeah. Well, we know the answer to that, right? Because Windows 11 makes your computer not your property anymore. Yeah. So
this is what I used to say about Macs. The reason they're not called PCs is because they're not personal computers. They don't belong to you. They belong to Apple. But the same applies to PCs. They're not personal computers anymore. They belong to Bill fucking Gates.
Apple was doing that all along, and it was very profitable for them. And I think Bill Gates kind of looked at that and went, "I could be making more money." You know, a lot of software does the same thing. Like when I started learning to use Photoshop, you bought Photoshop, you registered it. it worked on your computer. You installed the application on your computer, and it ran on your computer. You did not have to have an online connection to use it or anything. And now a lot of software, you buy the software and it gives you access to a server where the application is, and you can't use it now without an internet connection, which is in my opinion is pretty bogus. Sorry to go Gen X on you, but that's
everyone in our audience knows what we're talking about because we're all techno nerds. I have a 10-year-old Surface Pro 3, which is a Microsoft computer, and a 10-year-old MacBook, and it's a race against time to see which one of them just breaks down first from not being able to have the new technology. And my money's on the Surface Pro 3 breaking down first, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see which one of these companies is going to screw us over the first and force us to buy new hardware. And I hope it's not fucking Apple, because my MacBook cost $1,000 and my Surface Pro cost 300 quid. I think it was 10 years ago. And neither of which I can afford to replace. So please give me money, folks, or I will be broke forever. There's no links on this channel to how you can pay me, but fucking find them, please, because I'm gonna fucking die several deaths. Anyway,
it is important, and actually, I think on Feed the Badger we have a link for tipping Mike. So if you get the opportunity, that would be much encouraged, and there would be much gratitude. But let me get into our spiel so you know what I'm talking about. For anybody who hasn't already listened to the show and heard this a million times, as always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And with that, I'm going to close that window so I don't have to look at it anymore, so I can see more chats from you guys. I have 3 chat windows open on this on my desktop, because Restream can't show the vertical chat and it doesn't show the Rumble chat. We also got a super chat already from Meredith G for $5, and she says, HBR Talk 374, honey for the Badgers. Thanks for the thought-provoking discussion or conversation and creating a record of how long all the feminist bullshit has been going on. And yeah, it's been going on for quite a while. Even before I had my first computer. We've been talking about, the headaches of modern computers. It actually makes me miss the day when the time period when I used to use a Commodore 64, and you had to have 6 different disks to run a program. Well, some programs, games in particular, you had to have 6 different floppies and a code.
Anyone who remembers when floppy disks were actually floppy.
Floppy, yeah, and big too. Like they were way bigger than the much later harder versions. It was really hard for me to call those floppies once they were encased like that. I understand why they did it. So I had a teacher at a summer camp, day camp that I went to for nerds, that was trying to explain to all of us, who many of us actually already had computers at home and were using floppy disks. Here's how you insert the disk. She was like, it even has a convenient spot for your thumb and finger, and she put them over that little window where the disk is exposed, and to hold the disk. And half the room just went, oh no, because you can damage it doing that, and she did. The program didn't run, and they ended up having to do something else with the class.
But in the meantime, we talked amongst ourselves. I remember those days when the program was trying to load and then it didn't load. But we didn't get all that annoyed. We just talked amongst ourselves. Whereas nowadays, if the internet is like half as slow, like half as fast as it should be, we all kind of sit there on a computer going, "Motherfucker, come the fuck on!" And it's like kids who are addicted to TV when the TV gets turned off. No, make it start. Yeah, back in those days, we did have those problems, but we still had the other end where we could be like, oh yeah, there is a world outside computers, where if the computer's not loading, we can do something else. We can play fucking Scrabble or Trivial Pursuit or some shit.
Yeah. Yep. And by the way, if this woman's hands had been clean, she wouldn't have done any damage. But you just can't get goo on a like that. That's the bad thing. That's one of the reasons why my hands are such a mess. I wash my hands a lot and always have been, because I've always handled stuff like that, or I've handled film for cameras, 35 millimeter film. Did a lot of darkroom development when I was younger and such. Handled the equipment, which you always want your hands clean when you're handling any kind of photography or video equipment, because anything that gets inside, all the little mechanisms in there are very small and hard to clean. I've opened them up and cleaned them, so I know. And so, therefore, you really want to keep your hands clean. And that's part of what got me labeled OCD by doctor, was that I'm meticulous about keeping my hands clean, and I absolutely hate having anything on them because I'm afraid I'm going to get it on important stuff when I touch it. But it's different when you're handling things that get ruined if you get dirt on them even once, like photographs and film and floppy disks and sometimes cameras and stuff like that, and computers. But in any case, we will get to the meat of the discussion. Hopefully Lauren will get here. Lauren comes here straight from work, and she does commute in an area where traffic just sucks. Big urban area.
She usually gets off work 2 hours early on Thursday.
And
there's been no reaction yet, so I'm gonna start getting worried quite soon.
She's had this happen before, where traffic sucks on a particular day, and it actually takes her more than 2 hours to get home. So I'll get worried if it's later in the show and we can't get a hold of her or something. Then that'll be a different story. But I've seen her have this problem before, and like traffic in between the two states that she goes between is just, it can be a nightmare.
It's the outskirts of New York traffic, so I'm always worried. Maybe she's dead. She's probably dead. I should probably start making plans for if she's dead. Oh God.
Yes, she's not. All it takes is for her to get stuck in the line of traffic behind somebody else's fuck up, and it takes 3 times as long to get home. I mean, I'm in Dayton, which is like tiny in comparison to New York, right? It's a city, and it's considered a big city, but it's not considered a big city if you put it next to New York. And we have that happen with traffic here sometimes, especially around Malfunction Junction, which is like basically the section of I-75 that runs through the Dayton metro area. All it takes is one car to break down on the road, and traffic is immensely slowed down. And, you know, there doesn't even have to be an accident. All there has to be is somebody stalled out, and you get the rubberneckers slow everybody else down. So yeah, there's a 1,000 reasons why Lauren could be late that don't involve anything bad. For anything bad for Lauren, just annoyances. But in any case, we won't find out until we talk to her when she gets home, which she will. So, in any case, what we've been talking to up to this point, we've been talking to, ISIS, Night Motorcyclist says ICE is starting to operate in New York City. Well, they're going to know Lauren's an American the minute that they hear her accent. So she does not sound like she came from South America. But we've been going over, started with the UN Women article, What is the Manosphere and Why Should We Care? And their discussion on, dang it, sometimes my computer likes to put the window behind the window I'm using in front of the window I'm using. Really annoying. And that window was Discord, so I didn't accidentally just grab something and move it. But this is where we started, right? Just to remind you guys, this is where we started. We went through the research from the Institute for Strategic Dialogue mentioned at the bottom, and we went through the brochure on the Act to End Violence Against Women. We looked at this, right? And we are currently looking at Protocol on the Rights of Women, which is I believe this one is the African Protocol on the Rights of Women. We also have the other one open, but I haven't gone into this. And we had talked about their reasoning that they gave here, right? Their things about the African Platform for Action, the Dakar Declaration of 1994. So all the reasons why feminism should have already accomplished the things that this act is supposed to accomplish. Like they've been doing this for 30 years. We've established they've been doing this for 30 years with the support of the entire world's national governments and in a unified effort. And then on top of that, they've had, previous experience doing this without necessarily network support, and they've achieved nothing. Or they're claiming they've achieved nothing. So now we're going to look at what they believe are rights that are specific to women. And the reason I'm putting it that way is because these are things that they are demanding that I want to see whether men feel like those rights are respected in their lives. Does the government, the federal government, the world government, your state government, your local government, the people around you even, do they afford you these rights or not? So, Article 2, Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. It says, states parties shall combat all forms of discrimination against women through appropriate legislative, institutional, and other measures. So they want systematic, institutionalized protection from discrimination for women. And first of all, they want included in their national constitutions and other legislative instruments, if not already done, the principle of equality between men and women to ensure its effective application, meaning they want the ERA, right? The Equality Act in the United States. I don't know if the UK has a similar proposed piece of legislation, but the Equality Act, the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States that has been proposed for years and years. The history of that is initially it was written to state that the sexes would be treated equally under the law, which it's already kind of covered by the 14th Amendment, but apparently feminists thought they needed another amendment to make it stick. But
it's always a very similar formula. Do women have these rights? No, they don't. So we should give women these rights. And then someone from the background goes, do men have these rights? Well, that doesn't matter. What the fuck are you talking about? What does it even matter if men have these rights? Well, as it happens, men don't have these rights. But that is not important. Women need these rights because they've never had these rights. But men have never had these rights either. Well, the fuck you. Women should have all of these rights. And this is what gets me so pissed about these fucking traditionalists who are always saying that the problem with modern society is all these human rights. That ever since the Enlightenment, it's been less about God-given rights and more about government-given rights, and that we should give human beings all these rights. And I'm like, men have never been given these government-given rights. Like this has been the aim of these. I don't even know what adjective to use, but the thing we've called communist all these years is that governments have been trying to give rights to people they think have never had these rights, while ignoring the fact that other such people have never had these rights. And in what we think of as the original communist type thing, they go, well, poor people have never been given the rights that rich people have. And this was extended to men and women, claiming that women have never been given these rights, that men have never been given either. And you had a point when it was the rich and the poor, because the rich tend to be able to pay for these rights because they're rich in the way that the poor haven't. And that's kind of almost a good point, but not quite. But now you've extended it to men and women, as though men have always been given these rights just because they're men. No, they haven't. Rich men have, and rich women have. But that's not to say that men are given these rights just because they're men, and they never have. And then you have the vote and all this bullshit, as though men were given powers that women weren't given for the longest time. But no, women were advanced in the vote far more accelerated than men were ever given these rights. And I'm like, no, the problem isn't this haphazard application of rights. It's that they were never given to men. Certainly never given to native men. And yes, it does go back as far as the Enlightenment. It was never about giving everyone rights. It was about giving rights to the perceived neglected. And yes, we like to think it started with the poor, and that's what we call communism, giving rights to the poor that we think were never given to them in the first place. And yeah, that was arguable. But then it extended to giving women rights that they were never given, but men were never given these rights either. Yes, kings were, but most men are not kings. Yes, politicians were, like leaders of men were, but men were not. In fact, men who were not leaders were very much is made munitions in the capricious desires of men who were given these rights, and now women who are given these rights. And I say, and it's only got worse since then, because obviously it's only been extended from the assumption that women don't have rights to the assumption that racial minorities don't have rights, and the assumption that sexual orientation people do not have these rights, and now any given immigrant does not have these rights, and so everyone should have these rights except men, except the men we're supposed to be serving. And yeah, it's left. It's the case of advancing the human rights of everyone except native men, except the very people who are in place to advance these societies in the first place. The very people who are integral to upholding everyone else's rights and upholding the advancement of civilization.
Often at the cost of some of their lives.
And this is why we call it communism, but it's so much broader than the idea of communism. The idea of giving automatic rights to people who don't have to work for them. and
Yep.
The people who don't have to work for these rights have always been everyone except the men who act as workhorses. And yes, that includes slaves. That includes all the people that you'll pretend to activate for. And yeah, that's been the case ever since. It doesn't matter who's working for things. It's a case of giving free gimmies to anyone who isn't working for it. And that was women, and then minorities, and then blah 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 do fucking blah. It's everyone except the native men who have actually had to break their backs this whole time. And yes, it did start with men, because a lot of us like to act like it started with feminism 100 years ago, but it started with romantic chivalry 1,000 years ago. 1,000? Yes, 1,000 years ago. That's how long it's been going on. It's only been politicized for the last 100 years, but it's been socialized for the last 1,000 years. Ever since romantic chivalry. Yeah. And I don't have time to get into that, although a lot of you already understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and we did do an episode, I believe, on the history of that. We went to gynocentrism.com, which has a great article on the history of romantic chivalry. And actually, if you haven't visited that site, you really should, because there's a lot of interesting information on there about the dynamics between men and women, and in particular, romantic chivalry, the history of gynocentrism, and how it's manifesting today. Right now, Mr. Wright is focused a little bit on hypergamy, which is the practice of women marrying up, which has been a confounding factor in the dating world lately, because women have simultaneously striven to increase their incomes significantly and out-earn men, but then also, uniquely in terms of money, still want to marry up. But if you're making more money than the men, you cannot find somebody very easily who makes more money than you to marry. You've made it a goal to eliminate the fact that they make more money than you. So you're essentially reducing your dating pool significantly, if you hold those two standards simultaneously. I must earn a great deal of money, but he still has to earn more. And what's happened then is a lot of women have ended up unable to find a partner because of their conflicting standards. And they have been, there's now this epidemic of female loneliness that women are blaming on men. Why aren't these men earning more money? They're just as their jobs are just as lucrative as they always were. You're just earning more than you were earning before. And so therefore the idea that you should be depending on him financially has become obsolete. And if you feel like you need to marry up financially, so are you.
I haven't heard of this female loneliness epidemic.
Yeah, we hear all about the male loneliness
We
epidemic.
do, yes.
And I will be honest. And in my opinion, the primary cause of the male loneliness epidemic is the female bitchiness epidemic. It's not the same factor. So
it's easy to solve the female loneliness epidemic. Just be nice to men. I mean, not overly nice to men. Just like don't portray them as eternal oppressors of women. Just like understand that they are your fellow human beings and they want to be nice to you. So maybe you should be nice to them. Because if you're if you're nice to men, they will bend over backwards and pull the stars from the skies for you. That's all you need to do. Just be nice to men. We don't need you to be world-changing scientists, doctors, and engineers. Just be nice to us, and we will make sure you are never lonely again. But then this idea of the male loneliness epidemic introduced itself to women in the past couple of decades, and their reaction is, well, fuck you! You don't deserve a fucking cookie!
yeah.
They can't just say, be nice to it. No, we're already nice to you. We're already beyond nice to you. And they're just going, well, we don't give a fuck if you're lonely. Work yourselves to death. And then you still don't deserve any of our niceness. Fucking die, you bunch of faggot cunts. Sorry, I used a gamer word. I couldn't help myself. But that's basically what they're saying to us.
And it's a sad situation because when you look at the history of relationships, marriage didn't used to be a thing that happened because two people fell in love with each other and wanted to be together, right? It happened because two people's families decided that it was economically advantageous to them to connect their business dealings. And to seal that connection, they would marry off one of their sons and one of their daughters, from the opposing families, to each other, or because a father had decided that this guy or that guy would effectively provide for his daughter so that he would not have to provide for her in his old age, or a particularly wealthy individual, high status individual, had decided that he wanted to father children and made a deal with a family that one of their daughters would be his bride and bear his children. It didn't happen because romance. And you learned to bond with the individual that you were sort of stuck with. And or you courted with a lot of chaperoning in events where the two families mingled, and if everybody agreed that the match was a good match, then the marriage would happen. But it wasn't, he asks you out in some creative manner that appeals to your sensibilities without offending you, approach and does his particular special spider dance, and you choose to go out with him instead of eating his head. That's not the way it used to work. And I think that in some ways that was better, because instead of acting on impulse the way that women do today so often, and then getting divorced 5 to 10 years later, depending on whether they're waiting for eligibility for alimony, because some states still provide alimony, and some of those states only provide it if you've been married for 10 years. So there are women who stay in a marriage that they're not happy in and that they plan on leaving for extra years in order to get that alimony. But women will marry, they'll date on impulse, they'll marry based on pure in the moment lust, and then when they discover that they've actually married a human being and not a storybook character, they get mad. They don't work on the marriage. They don't put effort into the relationship, and they leave. And 70% of divorce today, 70 to 80%, depending on where you look, is initiated by women. And the reasons that many women give involve things like, the guy isn't doing enough housework, or they don't feel like they're still being wooed, like they're still being courted after they've said their vows, and so on. When historically, it wasn't the male obligation to continuously court a woman like that. And I don't understand why other women feel this is necessary. I find that kind of thing exhausting. Like, I enjoy quiet time with my husband where we're just sitting together and enjoying an activity together. Not that sex isn't fun too, right? Like, clearly everybody that participates in that enjoys that. But it's fun to sometimes just sit and play a game together, or sit and watch TV together, or go walk around and look at stuff that you're not going to buy today in a store together. It'd be nice to have that when we, get to this point of conditions that make it a thing for us, and stuff like that. But this idea of he has to bring you flowers. I'm allergic to flowers, by the way, so that's not a thing in our house. Or candy, or any he has to make you fat. It's all bullshit. Like, and it's exhausting. And it's one thing, like, if you're out somewhere and your partner really, really likes a particular character, their favorite video game character or their favorite movie character. Like, my husband's a big fan of The Tick. If I find something that I think he'll particularly like, it doesn't have to be his birthday coming up or Christmas coming up. I just get it. And like, look what I found. I knew you would like this. It's not about romance. It's about making each other happy and getting to see each other smile and enjoying each other's just experience of life and personality and everything. And we do stuff like that for each other. But this whole idea of men have to bend over backwards to make women happy. Honestly, I think that perception is the biggest cause of female misery right now in the world. Outside of things that people can't do anything about, like famine and natural disasters and stuff. And like that women cannot make their own happiness and have to wait for men to make it for them. It's a huge weakness in women, and it's historically there's not a support for it. Like, historically that was not a thing. Women did the same thing that men did. If you want to be happy, you decide what your conditions for happiness are based on things that you can achieve, and then you work toward those and you make them happen. And, even if you have to work around all kinds of other conditions and situations that make it more difficult. And in fact, the harder you have to fight for it, sometimes the bigger the happiness is when you get to it. But instead, women create shit like this, right? include in their national constitutions and other legislative instruments, if not already done, the principle of equality between women and men, and ensure its effective application. So you look at the United States, for instance. We have that already. We have had that. Let's see, what year was the 14th Amendment passed? I have to look at if I have anything on the history of this, because I've got a bit of the transcript here. I'm gonna actually have to look that up.
It was the year 666.
Yeah, no.
I hereby assert this. I refuse to elaborate, and I leave.
The 14th Amendment was ratified on July 9th, 1868. So we've had this for almost, like, it's over 100 years. It's almost 200 years. Like, and that's equality between the sexes. It says in the 14th Amendment, well, it doesn't specify all the factors, right? It prohibits the states from denying any person equal protection of the laws. And the courts have consistently interpreted it to include things like sex and race. So the government cannot discriminate against people by denying them equal protection under any law on the basis of their sex. Women cannot be denied equal protection under the law. But an Equal Rights Amendment, which was first proposed in 1923 and had a completely different wording than it does now, but it states that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. And that is completely unnecessary because it's already in the Constitution. But the second section says Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article, meaning that this gives Congress the ability to pass new laws with the explicit purpose of imposing equality of the sexes in some way or another. Well, we already know that feminists have switched from the idea of equality to the idea of what they call equity. They are not talking about the value of your property holdings if you were to sell them. They're talking about equalizing people's outcomes regardless of the effort that they put in, their circumstances, their choices, and so on. So two people start out with an equal right to non-discrimination in the process of application to university. Since universities receive financial backing from the federal government, and so they both apply. They both get into university. They both take the same classes, the same course of study. They both graduate, and at the end of their graduation, they're both licensed, registered nurses, right? And Bob goes to work for a medical center that is part of a medical network, large medical network, and gets his salary is commensurate with the nurses that work at this large medical network. And Julie goes to work for a private practitioner that is not part of a large medical network, but maybe has treatment rights, to go into the hospitals of that medical network. So they run into each other at some point, and Julie finds out that she's making less money than Bob. She assumes that it's discrimination, but actually, private practitioner Dr. Jones pays all of her nurses what Julie is getting paid, the males and the females. It's just that despite having credentials from the same university, Bob and Julie did not choose to go into the same work environment. And so there's no discrimination there, right? But under the ERA, there could be laws passed by Congress that would force that practitioner to increase her wages for her nurses, because women who work for her are not getting paid the same as men who work for some other company. And that could be said to be discrimination, right? And as a result, she has to fire some of her nurses because she doesn't have the budget.
As I've often expressed, women are the nucleus of society, and men are the outer cytoplasm, albumin of society. It's like an egg. It's like a cell. It's like a celestial body that has a core and an outer mantle. And in all of these situations, women occupy the middle of it because they are protected by the outer shell of men. That does not suggest that women cannot be ambitious, even though it's men that are on the outside and women that are on the inside. If anything, as I've often said, women are often more ambitious than men, and I often cite Lady Macbeth as an example of this, even though that's fiction. These fictions are often presented as reflections of what's really going on in the real world. And what's really going on in the real world is women support men as men expand those boundaries. And Lady Macbeth is a cautionary tale as to when women can express too much of their ambitions and expressions of that ambition on men. Women push their ambitions on men, and that's okay, because men are already appointed as the sentinels of the outside of the human condition, never mind the human society or the human civilization. And it's never been beyond the possibility of women's power to push men outwards. I mean, they're in the exact position to do that because women are on the inside, and what better position can you be than from the inside to push men further to the outside? And that's I think that's largely been what has pushed the human race to expand our horizons. Women are more ambitious than men, but women use men as their agents of this expansion. And this has always been the case. But if you appoint women to push themselves through this agency, through this albumin, through this cytoplasm, then you don't actually accelerate their influence. You only blend them together, and until this dynamic of nucleus and cytoplasm, this dynamic of yolk and egg white, if you will, it only blends the two together and undermines the influence of both. Women have always been the force that pushes men outwards, while men have always been the force that is thereby pushed outwards, and thereby, to some degree, by their own elements, pushes themselves outwards into the outside world. And this is how humans became the dominant species on Earth, because we have this dynamic where women push men outwards, and men expand on this outward pushing, and this has worked for us for the longest time. But like I said, if you pretend that this dynamic doesn't exist, then you're only going to blend the yolk and the albumin together, the nucleus and the cytoplasm together, and that's not going to help with the outward pushing. It's only going to render us as a generalized blob that no longer has this outward push, and that's feminism in a nutshell. That's communism in a nutshell. Where if you try to equalize everyone, then you'll undermine this dynamic of inward core and outward mantle that are both pushing out against each other. I did that video all this time ago called I can't forget it. You remember the one it was, but the reason we've got this far as a dominant species on this earth is because we have this perfectly balanced dynamic between this core of women and this outer mantle of men that are both able to push out into the outside world and dominate it. And if we're just going to deny this and pretend that men and women are the same, then we're just going to end up with this amorphous blob where there is no core and there is no outer mantle, where there is no nucleus and there is no cytoplasm. And yeah, we just this seems like something that wouldn't happen in nature, and yeah, normally it doesn't. This abstract dynamic between men and women, and it can be manipulated in this artificial abstract way that we can only push it back on ourselves, where we become this thing that's not even an egg. Imagine an egg that has no yolk and no egg white. Imagine this cell that has no nucleus and no cytoplasm. Imagine a planet that has no core and no outer mantle. Like, it wouldn't exist. Like, there's a reason these things exist with these separate layers. It became this way through, well, gravity in the sense of planets, and biology in the sense of eggs. I mean, I'm not a biologist, and I'm not astronomer or whatever it takes to figure out what the fuck planets are doing. But yeah, it's the only reason we've been able to deny these obvious differences and these obvious dynamics when it comes to gender is because of the last century, again, dare I say, the last millennium of this denial of human nature, or indeed natural nature of any kind of nature. Again, the only reason it's worked when it comes to the dynamic between men and women is because we've persisted in this outright denial of the obvious difference between men and women. And it is an obvious difference. Like, it couldn't be more obvious. Men and women are different. The males and females are different, and they've been different for fucking 1 billion years or so, ever since single-celled organisms like diverged into this brave new world, dare I say, where there are actually two different kinds of organisms, and they can develop their, again, dare I say, diversity.
Yeah.
And diversity is important when it comes to men and women. And it's very ironic, isn't it, that the very people who try to enforce diversity don't mean the diversity between men and women. While they're telling us that it's important that we have black and white and brown and yellow people all together in the same society, it's not important that we have men and women in the same society, because men and women are not an important difference. No, we can just smoosh those things together. So, until we have a society where there's no such thing as men and women, but there's definitely a difference between black and white and brown and yellow people, and they should all be smushed together. Well, yes, they can. They can. In theory, they can. But men and women will never be smushed together. Like, it's physically impossible. It's genetically impossible. And yet that's where it started. And that's why everyone's so obsessed right now about immigrants and about racial replacement and such. Because after feminists tried to completely delete the difference between men and women, and they couldn't quite make it happen because it's fucking impossible. But once they got enough power, they while they were trying to pretend that men can become women and women can become men, to no avail because it's impossible, they moved on to, well, white people and black people and brown people and yellow people can be smushed together. Well, yes, they can. And yes, that is possible, but it's not necessarily a good idea. Maybe you should walk your theories back to where you thought you could just abolish gender, because you can't abolish gender. I mean, I know you like to pretend that you could like redefine gender as sex and redefine sex as gender and go, well, we're calling these things different things now, so men can become women because men and women are things that we now define as different things. But it's, at the same time, they're still pretending that white people are evil and brown people are good. Like, and
they can become the same.
Yeah, they have it all backwards. They're trying to pretend that men can become women and women can become men, but they're still not on board with the idea that white people can become brown people and brown people can become white people. But they can. Like, ironically enough, let's say Russians and Indians are both Caucasian because they're both descended from the Proto-Indo-European peoples of the Caucasus Mountains. Some of them went north to Russia and some of them went south to India. And the only reason that they are different colors is because of climate. Like, race actually is a spectrum. Like, it absolutely is. Like, the further north you go, the paler your skin becomes, and the further south you go, the further towards the equator you go, the darker your skin becomes. So that actually is a spectrum. But these fucking deceptive bastards are here pretending that you can't change from one race to another. No, that's an inherent property. But you can change from one sex to another because we don't call it sex. We call it gender. But there's not. It's because gender isn't sex. But by the way, sex is gender. You can actually change your sex because sex is gender, and it's, they can't keep up with these fucking lies. And I don't even know where it began or where it's even gonna end. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
We're just being fucking terrorized by these liars who will pretend that you can change things that you can change, but you can't change things that can't be changed. It's mental. Everything's so mental.
It's designed specifically to exhaust you. The arguments that are made are often convoluted, manipulative, rely on logical fallacies, and are just enforced through consistent repetition rather than actual debate. When you have somebody who goes through with you a series of logic and reason in which you knock down every argument they have, and you point out the reasons why their argument is wrong. And you provide solid information, solid evidence, solid facts, and connect them with solid logic. And they come back with, I just don't believe that's true. Or you're just mad, or it's weak of you to think that way, which is what feminists do with just about every masculine argument. And there's a whole set. Actually, we went through these in one show as well. A whole set of shaming tactics they use. You're scary. You're angry. Stop whining. And so on. You're selfish. Right? They have all these different charges that they will lob at you for. And what it is they're engaging in a Darvo attack, which is a manipulation tactic. Most rhetorical fallacies are manipulation tactics. When somebody uses a Mott-Bailey argument, which is when they hide a harder to defend argument behind an easier to defend, more mild claim. Feminism is about equality. Therefore, if you're against feminism, you're against equality of the sexes, equal treatment under the law. And then as soon as you say, okay, I'm not against feminism, then you can't be against what feminists are lobbying for. So when feminists lobby against equal parenting rights, that's for equality, like we said, and therefore you can't oppose it, right? That's your Mott-Bailey, and that's a manipulation tactic. It's a tactic to keep you from defending yourself and defending your sex against these types of arguments. This is being pushed as something that will be protected under national legislation in every country by this particular effort. And this specific manifesto is for Africa, right? But the organization that produced this is a world organization. It's not just Africa. They want to do this in your country, wherever you live, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in one of the South American countries, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in Asia. They want to do this in your country. So they want to have an equal rights amendment or an equal rights clause that says something to the effect of the government's going to enforce these equal rights. The government's going to enforce equal treatment. And they're not just talking about equality of opportunity, genuinely equal treatment. They're talking about equality of outcome, regardless of opportunity, action, or aptitude. And so, for instance, you have two people running a race. One of them has better coordination and is simply able to move their legs at a higher speed than the other one. And maybe they even have a better stride. Maybe they got longer legs, right? That person is going to win the race. They start out with they're behind the same starting line. They're running on the same track. They have the same signal to start running. It's not inequality that one of them loses. It's not inequality that one of them is faster. But feminists want to treat it as inequality if they don't cross the same finish line at the same time. And the issue is much more complicated when you have two different people that choose to run two different tracks, two different courses, and they're not crossing the same finish line. And one of them has chosen a long looping track, and the other one has chosen a more direct route. And then they want to complain that the person who chose the long looping track is being discriminated against because they had more difficulties in reaching their goal, and their goal didn't take them to the same place as the person who chose the more direct route. that's aptitude versus attitude or action. Both of those things can interfere with your result. And you don't have a right to have someone else's result mitigated or your result handed to you because your choices made your result different from someone else's. But under an Equal Rights Amendment, Congress would have the power to enforce through legislation those changes. Someone in the chat a while back pointed out, like where I said, they might force the small employer to raise their wages to suit to fit in with the big employer, or they might force the big employer to lower wages to match what the smaller employer is paying. Both of those could happen. And anytime the government interferes with wages, it interferes with the relationship between the business and the worker, and the business doesn't end up at the losing end. The worker usually does. So, for instance, Ohio raised its minimum wage, its state minimum wage, above the federal minimum wage, and it's not a huge difference. The federal minimum wage is 7 something, and the state minimum wage is 10 something an hour. It's not like the California $15 an hour, but it's still a significant difference, right? And this was supposed to take fast food workers out of the poverty level. So one of the things that I've noticed, and it took a while because we don't eat a lot of fast food. We will when there have been instances where we just don't have time because, like I said, I've been averaging about 80 hours a week. And so that does take away from time to prepare meals. And we don't always go to, we don't necessarily go to places that have a lot of fried foods and everything because we're old. So, we go to Subway places, sub sandwich places, and there's a bunch of different stuff like that. Or, there's a local deli and everything. A lot of these places have started allowing their workers to accept tips. And it's not even like it used to be that fast food workers didn't get tips. Right? And fast food is food that's available pretty much instantly after you order it, as opposed to you order and then the food is prepared. So a lot of these sub sandwich places, you go in and you select your bread and you select your meat and you select your toppings and they put it together. And delis are similar. They'll have certain types of sandwiches, but they are only assembling pre-prepared food as opposed to cooking, which is, takes more time, and you sit and you wait in between when you order and when you receive your food. And the difference in tipping used to be if there were people waiting your table. So you sit down, you order, the waiter goes, the server goes, and you get your food from the server, not at the counter. And so, even places that cook things that are available really fast, like if you go some places like burger joints, they don't necessarily have it all pre-prepared. They might pre-prepare their most popular stuff, but if you order something that people don't usually order, they're going to cook it after you order it. It might take a minute or two, but a server is not bringing it to you. You wait at the counter to get it. So a lot of these places are now, when you pay, it offers you the option of tipping, and it offers you the option of, 15%, 20%. Even some of them go up to 30% now for fast food workers. Why would these places start offering you the ability to tip after they just had to increase, after they've had to increase their workers' pay? What would they want to make your stay more expensive for? And so I started looking into it, and of course, if you can accept tips, then you're a tipped worker. And if you work in the restaurant business or some of the other industries where tipping is allowed, a tipped worker does not get the same minimum wage that a worker that doesn't get tips, that cannot accept tips, receives. And I know this because when I worked I used to work at a gas station. We worked hard, but we didn't work as hard as, like, I wouldn't have put my job on the same level as, say, construction workers and stuff like that. But they would come in and they would get food and they would see us working, and people would try to tip us, and we couldn't accept it, because if we could accept tips, it would reduce the amount of pay that would be our minimum wage. And so it was illegal for our employer to allow us to accept tips, because we were being paid as regular minimum wage workers, not tipped workers. A tipped worker can get less than the federal minimum wage. The federal minimum wage for tipped workers is fairly low, and the Ohio minimum wage for tipped workers is in the $5 and some change range. So to get around the requirement that they increase the pay of these minimum wage workers, more and more fast food joints are giving you the opportunity to tip, which makes their employees tipped workers. And if they can establish that their employees are tipped workers, they can almost cut their pay in half, which saves the company quite a bit of money and completely makes it a moot point that the minimum wage has gone up. Pretty sneaky, huh? So when people do these things, they don't think about the consequences, right? Minimum wage goes up. Okay, these changes take place in your workplace. Okay, now your pay has gone down. Or the other end of it, when I was working at the gas station, the minimum wage went up, and it was a pretty big hike. And you have to realize, when I first started working, the minimum wage was less than $4 an hour. I've been working for a long time. But in any case, I know other people that started working when the minimum wage was like less than $2 an hour. So that's not right. The prevailing wage, because there wasn't a minimum wage, but the prevailing wage was less than $2 an hour for the types of jobs that are considered minimum wage now. But in any case, you have these intentions, and what you end up with is my employer, when they had to increase their wages, they added to the number of tasks we were expected to do during a shift, which effectively took away smoke breaks. We weren't allowed to eat anything when we were in the front store, only when we were in the back room. So if you didn't have time to go into the back room away from the customers and spend a few minutes not working, your 8-hour shift had no breaks, no lunch, no smoke breaks, no nothing. You didn't get to eat in between when you arrived at work and when you went home. So that's essentially what they did, was they eliminated breaks. And similarly, some places switched full-time jobs to part-time jobs so that they didn't have to pay for benefits. And some places just eliminated positions and divided the work from those positions among the other employees. So your workload increased and your hours did not. So it and then shortly thereafter, it also became more expensive to get stuff, because everybody was raising their prices because they had to pay their workers more, and therefore you just lost the benefits of the increase in pay. Right. So, you had quite a variety of ways that employers get around these things. But women put these laws in place so that women can sue employers. And when the individual that works for the family practitioner that's paying their employees less sues to, or files for legislative change, they usually sue somebody and they usually get a settlement or an award. And while everybody else suffers changes in their workplace, that litigant goes home with a settlement, like anywhere between $15,000 and $50,000, just depending on, or more, depending on what they can say they were denied. So then, the second B is that sort of stipulation: Congress shall have the power to enforce, enact and effectively implement appropriate legislative or regulatory measures, including those prohibiting and curbing all forms of discrimination. And then this part's important, particularly those harmful practices which endanger the health and general well-being of women. Right? So you have workplaces where there's heavy lifting to be done, or there's work that's particularly dangerous or dirty. And, in a lot of instances, women will pawn tasks off on men that involve heavier lifting, more strenuous physical labor, or use of strength, more dangerous measures, things that are more unsafe, like working on the night shift at a gas station as opposed to working on the day shift at a gas station in a neighborhood in an urban area, or in a neighborhood where if something happened to you at the gas station, it's so sparsely populated that nobody would know until the next day, right? Or in a neighborhood where you take in a lot of money and there's not a lot of security, or driving a truck, transporting money, things like that, where you might get robbed, handling equipment that is dangerous or difficult to control. All these things. I used to have a manager at the gas station that if something was needed out in the back shed, we had cups and stuff like that for the pop and everything that we stored out there. She would send the male employees to go get them. She would not send the female employees out there to go get them, especially if it was not yet light or if it was after dark and she had to turn off the back door alarm to let somebody out. It was never a female. She always sent a male out there because there was risk involved, and sometimes the things that were being carried in were heavy. And I called her on it once. I was like, "Why don't you ever send us out there?" And she's like, "He's a man. He can do it. He's big and strong." And then of course the guy involved, the guy that was being sent out at the time, he was like, "I can do it. It's not a big deal. I don't mind." But the reality is, he didn't get paid extra for that. He didn't get paid extra for being the person who had to take risk. Probably the worst example of this that I've seen was an ex-boyfriend of mine before I got married, worked at a hospital in Lima, and there was a shooting victim that came in for emergency treatment, and his carotid artery, I believe it was his carotid artery, not his jugular, was punctured by the bullet, was ripped by the bullet, really, to the degree that to prevent it from leaking, they literally had to squeeze it closed because it wasn't just a little, you couldn't just cover it, so this was an execution style assault, and this young man did eventually die. They could not save him. He was too far gone when he arrived, and the injury was too bad for them to repair it in time for him to recover from the blood loss. And it was a horrific situation, but it was made worse by the fact that he was a member of a gang, and they got his family and their families all riled up. And there was a protest outside of the hospital. They accused the hospital of killing him. And so there was kind of a race riot out there where When you looked outside the hospital, the building was surrounded by angry, yelling people, and they put the men in the doorways. Right? They put male orderlies, which is what he was, male nurses, and even some of the doctors had to guard the doorways if they were not in treatment with a patient. In order, and then the women they didn't take their breaks. They just went, on with their work and everything. And that was to keep people from coming in and attacking the hospital. So they were doing security work, even though they were not hired as security workers. And it was an incredibly stressful event for this guy. He was ex-military, so he fully understood the situation he was in. He didn't have any kind of weapon. He didn't have any way to defend himself. He was just asked to stand there in a doorway and look intimidating so people didn't try to get in past him, which is a horrible position to put somebody in during a protest. And that was gendered. Not one woman was asked to do that. Only the men. And not one of them got a bonus for it. High risk, low pay.
This is what we mean when we call people communists. Because I really have to address this. Because so many of our detractors call us fascists. And then we ask them, what do you mean by fascists? I mean, particularly the people who turn up to these protests. And they're calling us all fascists. And we're like, what did you mean by fascists? And they go, well, I don't really know. I wish I was more educated on this subject, but I don't really understand. But I'm just gonna turn up and call you fascists. But and yeah, the flip side of that coin is, well, y'all call us communists. So what does that mean? And yeah, what Hannah just said is what we're talking about. Like, even if you're less capable of doing the job, you should be paid just as much. And yeah, that is what has always been entailed in this fucking communism. It doesn't matter how much merit you have. Everyone should be paid the same thing, no matter how much merit they have. And that's whether it's class or gender or sex or race or whatever. That's always been what communism has been about. Everyone should get the same outcome, regardless of how good you are at the task. And it goes all the way down into education. Like everyone, if there's any disparity between the genders or the races or whatever, everyone should have the same outcome, even if it's down to how you perform in your job. And we're like, no, that's not how it should work. But anyone who says such a thing is called a fascist. And then we ask, well, what do you mean by fascist? And they go, we don't really know. It's just anyone who's not on board with this fucking communism shit. And we're like, yeah, no, we're not. We're not the thing that you call us just because we're not communists, just because we don't think that everyone should be given the same outcome, just for any given fucking reason. And yes, it started with class, or it started with whatever the fuck it was that's been lost to the annals of history before that, and whatever it's developed into in terms of men versus women, white versus blacks, fucking cis versus trans, or whatever. Like, that's never been the point. We've always been about, like, do you have the merit to do the thing? And that's couldn't be further from fascism, because fascism has always been that along the lines of, I think, not even nation. It's in terms of state, and state's not the same as nation. State is the authority that has declared itself the authority over the nation, and that's not what any of us have ever been talking about. Um, you know, I'm trying to centralize myself on what I'm talking about, but this is why because it resembles communism, just along various different lines that everyone has to have the same outcome. And this is why feminism is just communism in panties, and BLM is just communism in black panties or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We can actually
it's communism. It's communism that has dressed itself in black issues.
Yeah, we can describe what communism is. We can pinpoint the fundamental ethos of what communism is, and it's everyone should have equal outcomes regardless of how shit they are at their jobs. Y'all have never been able to pinpoint fascism. And when I say y'all, I mean, you know what I mean. Most of us knows what I mean. They've been turning up to these protests saying, "You're a fascist, you're a Nazi." And we're like, what does that mean? What is a fascist? And they can never tell us.
Interesting. If you give them the definition of fascism, they don't accept it because they like to call non-interference by government fascism instead of
exactly.
So it's kind of an interesting. They have this kind of interesting lack of knowledge. But I one of the questions I wanted the men in particular, the chat, to consider. Right, we have this statement here that these feminists want law and regulatory measures. That's policy. Prohibiting and curbing all forms of discrimination, particularly those harmful practices which endanger the health and general well-being of women. So think about this. How many other instances like the one I described a few minutes ago can you think of that you know about in your life where you or another man you know has had a higher expectation of manual labor or a higher expectation of risk imposed on him in the workplace without an increase in pay because the women cannot be expected to do it because they're protected because they're women and he's not because he's a man? Right? This is something that women expect protection from. Women expect to not be discriminated against in such manners. But when men face this type of discrimination, well, you have to stand in the doorway and keep these people out because you're a man and you're stronger. When that's really a job for the police, right? That's really a job for people who have taken on certain security roles, not just like the person who sits in a guard shack and lets people in, but armed security whose job it is to deal with threatening situations, such as in a prison. But they didn't bring in anybody like that, and the police were outnumbered. So, it's not just the amount of work, the amount of labor. It's not just the hours worked. It's not just like those things are problems as well. It's not just what shift you're on, what might happen on that shift. It was on the night shift at the gas station where I worked that twice we had people come in and hold employees up at gunpoint. Twice we had people come in and hold employees up at knife point. Once we had an employee who was robbed digitally using a very sophisticated attack, actually, a combination of attacks on our computers and on our on her intellect. And then once we also had a distraction attack where one person came in and got the lone employee away from where the registers were and into the cooler where she couldn't see the register. And the other person then got into the change maker, which wasn't locked, and took all the quarters, which amounted to, a couple bucks. But it was still a theft. And these are all things that happen on the night shift. And in every instance, the employee suffered some sort of consequence, whether it was trauma from the attack, or in the case of the digital robbery and the trick played on the employee, the individual distracting her, that employee was held accountable for that theft because she wasn't watching the register, and she should have said, I can't go back there. But so that situation, usually you see men in that situation because employers like that will not put women on that shift, or men are in a financial situation where they can't turn that shift down. They can't afford to turn that shift down. And women are usually in more of a financial situation where they can be pickier about what shift they take. And so they are not as likely to be present in the store and alone in the store when someone decides to target it with a robbery. And this is, again, discrimination that particularly involves harmful practices that endanger the health and general well-being of the employee. Women are to be protected from that, but how much protection have men had from that? Is that a right that has been protected for men throughout history? Or is that something women are demanding that hasn't been done for men? And to me, I see that as something women are demanding that hasn't been done for men. Similarly, they want a gender perspective in policy decisions. So they literally are asking for discrimination here. Having a gender perspective in policy decisions is different than having a gender blind perspective where you say this enforcement should not be affected by the sex of the individual it's affecting. Here they're saying it should be affected. Women are supposed to get special treatment. And then the next one, take corrective and positive action in those areas where discrimination against women in law and in fact continues to exist. So in other words, they're going to go through various areas of government and employment and so on, and look for problems where nobody is complaining and make changes. And then finally, they're saying they want it supported locally, nationally, regionally, and continentally. They want the entire continent to be on board with this. They want initiatives, which means feminists getting paid to give advice and create materials and make proclamations and do pretend research that isn't real research, directed at eradicating all forms of discrimination, but only against women. They don't want to put any effort into eliminating areas such as where men are asked to take higher risk, or men are asked to work dirtier jobs, or men are the only people who get drafted, right? Or men don't benefit as much from social services because you have to have custody of children and men are discriminated against in custody court. Then we have, this one really struck me. Not this part. This is, again, this is just kind of a repetition. States shall commit themselves to modify the social and cultural patterns of conduct of women and men throughout public education, information, education and communication strategies with a view to achieving the elimination of harmful cultural and traditional practices. So they're coming after the culture and traditions in Africa, the way that families interact with each other, the way that people relate to each other. They want the law to interfere in those relationships, based on the idea of the inferiority or superiority of either of the sexes, which is, again, weasel words, because we do recognize that men and women are different. For instance, under domestic violence law, right? As soon as you're talking about violence in the home, even when it goes two ways, one of feminists' first arguments is that men are stronger and therefore they're more accountable for their violence than women should be for theirs.
Except in sports.
Except in
it's
sports,
a very different thing.
Yeah, then it's okay for women to sue to get positions on men's athletic teams, but not the other way around. All right. And again, stereotyped roles for women and men. So they refer to traditions, long-standing traditions that evolved out of natural human behavior as stereotypes. But this one, every woman shall have the right to dignity inherent in a human being and the recognition and protection of her human and legal rights. So guys, when the state interacts with you, do you feel like the state is recognizing your right to dignity inherent in a human being? The first thing that I think
sounds like some incel shit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I want the right to dignity, and that means being recognized as someone with sexual dignity. Something. That means you can't just treat me like I'm some kind of sexual vagrant or whatever. No. How very dare you?
People who can act like you're a threat because they had to step over you on the street since you had no place else to go want the right to dignity inherent in a human being recognized by the federal government for women, right? When the police come to your house because your neighbor heard your television too loud and they think there's a domestic violence incident taking place in there, and they have the right to come in because the complaint was a domestic violence complaint, and they have the right to go through your home and make sure that nobody is in there has been abused by you, and the right to accuse you of having harmed someone, and you don't have the right to freedom from having your place examined and being treated like a likely criminal. Is your dignity inherent in a human being, and your human and legal rights being recognized in that moment?
This is what I mean about rights. I mean, I know the idea of a right can be corrupted, especially within the legal system. But we have a way of drawing this line. A right is your ability to do your own thing as long as it does not detract anyone else's legal thing. As long as you can live your life without killing anyone else's life. As long as you can build your wealth without without detracting from anyone else's wealth through means that are in some way unfair, right? But dignity can't be pinned down in this way. Dignity is like so many other things. Like it can be pushed one way or another. Like it's like a fence. It's like the difference between harassment and disagreement. Anyone can say that you have offended my dignity, and like offense is just as subjective as dignity. Like anyone can say that their dignity has been offended. Like men can do this, women can do this, but thanks to the UN and other such institutions, the very idea of dignity has been the market has been cornered by women. Like you can't offend a woman's dignity, but there's no such thing as offending a man's dignity, because women have dignity and men do not, and that's really all it comes down to. What is dignity? It's subjective, and it's given only to those whom the authorities have given it. Right?
Yeah. And what the authorities have done in Western states, Europe and Canada, the United States to a degree, is alter the legal landscape so that all a man has to do is be accused of offending a woman's sensibilities by his very presence or non-action, non-decision, and he is on his back foot legally. In some instances, he's already broken the law. And an example of this is misogyny laws that are passed in some places and being proposed in others, where all it takes is for a couple of guys to be having a conversation with each other at a bus stop about their wives or girlfriends or women that they might be considering dating, and some other woman is offended by something they said or takes it in an offensive manner, even if it's not an offensive statement. And all of a sudden they're in violation of the misogyny law. Women have accused men of harassment for allegedly following them by not crossing the street when the woman comes out of a building and the man is walking on the street behind her. Right? You're walking from your workplace on that side of the street to your apartment on that side of the street, several blocks away, where there's no turns in your walk and there's no reason for you to be on the other side of the street. But if she comes out of a building on that side of the street and is also walking on that side of the street, and you're behind her, God forbid she decides that that's creepy. Right? You certainly must not catch up and walk past her, because you're sneaking up behind her, even if you were there first. Even if you don't interact with her at all. And if you do interact with her, just saying hi can get you accused of harassment or misogyny. Right? Is that dignified for men? Does that respect a man's dignity? Or is that the presumption of dastardly intentions and being treated like trash? Right? The next one, every woman shall have the right to respect as a person and to the free development of her personality. Doesn't give any specificity of, having a decent personality, right? So a woman could be lecherous, she could be a harridan, she could be a criminal, she could be anything. She could be the best of the best or the worst of the worst. It doesn't matter. She has the right to respect as a person and to develop the free development of her personality. What about men? We brought up incels a little bit ago. Right? What if somebody has a socially awkward personality, has difficulty connecting with the opposite sex, is unattractive in some way, or has a disability that people find unappealing to try to engage with? Does he have the right to free development of his personality?
Yeah,
does he have the right to be curmudgeon?
We often portray this as that women generally do have respect for men, and men are generally nice to women, and then we have to, dare I say, unpack that difference. That women respect men because men are stronger than them, and men are nice to women. Well, I was going to say because they're weaker than them, but then you have to unpack the difference between respectful and nice, and there really isn't much difference. It's just that women are generally afraid of men, and men are generally not afraid of women. And that's not for any particular good reason. Well, maybe it's for an evolutionary reason, because we are all built for the Stone Age, for an age before there was any such thing as a government, before there was any such thing as the police or what have you. But when you draw all that down, if you can imagine men and women living with each other in the Stone Age, we generally respected each other and we were nice to each other. In the case of women, it was because they knew that men were stronger than them, and in the case of men, it was because they knew that women were generally nice to them. Now, that might be an oversimplification, but I say this as though none of these authorities existed in the Stone Age, but they did. As long as men and women existed, it was understood that men were stronger than women, and evolution had loaded us with these neurological pathways that kind of taught us that had taught us long in advance that men who were disrespectful to women would get the shit beaten out of them by other men if they were ever disrespectful to women. Like we act like this is something that men only do to women. Like men are always disrespecting women. But if they ever did it in public, other men would beat the shit out of them. And it still goes on. Even in this age of multiculturalism.
Yeah.
where you'll have to suggest that I do not need to elaborate on what I'm talking about. But in the same way, women were generally nice to men, because if they were not nice to men, then they would suffer similar consequences. And so this idea that respect and niceness are at all different. Not that women in the modern age have any idea of what it means that men are generally nice to women in the same way that women are generally respectful to men. I mean, it's the same thing. It's that you understand the powers that one another have. Like after a century or so of a feminist indoctrination, we're given the idea that that they are different things. That women are respectful to men, but men are not nice to women. No, they are. We both have the same respect and niceness to each other. I mean, like I said, they're the same thing. It's just that this mutual respect and niceness have been unraveled over the last 100 years. Indeed, the last 1,000 years. Blah, 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 romantic chivalry. We've always respected this idea of being respectful and nice to one another as genders. Why wouldn't we be? This is how we got this far in the evolutionary ladder, by men and women being nice and respectful to each other in ways that no other species is, because no other species has these various layers of intelligence, of understanding each other's intelligence. This is how we got this far, because we're able to understand that there's no real difference between niceness and respectfulness. Like we can imagine each other's brains. We can we can understand that we can understand each other's brains, and that we can understand each other's understanding of each other's brains. And I'm going to have to defer you to Homath again, because he did a brilliant video yesterday, I think. Fucking subscribe to Homath. He's a fucking genius, and he's got this way of explaining these levels where you understand other people's understanding, and then you understand other people's understanding of other people, and then you understand other people's understanding of other people's understanding of other people's. And it's this is fucking ancient Greek philosophers have figured this out fucking a long time ago. But
yeah, the video title that you'll be looking for, it's ho_math. By the way, is the name on YouTube. The channel, and the video is titled "The High Levels of Thinking," and then in brackets, "and how they make things better sometimes." So it is
again.
He does have quite the handle on human interaction.
He is 150 IQ at least. The man's a literal
genius.
People have understood this since the ancient Greek days. We've just forgotten all of this, especially in the advent of romantic chivalry. This shit has just rotted our brains to the point where we've forgotten to understand things we should have understood, since fucking thousands of years ago. Gah.
And actually, if you're a young woman and you are internally tough enough to do this, you should listen and watch the videos on Homath's channel and consider if you might be able to make your life easier by taking the advice and incorporating understanding of the information that he's conveying. Because if I'd had something that blunt and explained like you're 5, in high school, about all of the ways that women self-sabotage and sabotage their relationships and behave stupidly, there are multiple instances where I put myself through the school of self-inflicted hard knocks that I wouldn't have had to pay that tuition, because I'd have already had the lesson and I have already altered my behavior accordingly, and I would have had better outcomes for me and the people around me. So y'all are lucky that he's around now, because there really wasn't anybody doing that women could listen to in the 80s that women were interested in listening to. Like, I listened to Rush Limbaugh, and I got a little bit of good advice on acting like an adult from Rush Limbaugh, but Rush was more of a provocateur, like a shock jock, than anything. And of course I listened to my minister, but my minister was far more gentle and diplomatic. And that's not what women need. And women need to be bluntly told how to be adults instead of modern women, because you can't be both. And we're doing that, but Homath is doing it on a whole other level, with a whole other level of explanation. And if you are tough enough to listen and not take it personally, it's excellent advice and excellent information. It's difficult for women to not take stuff like that personally, but the effort, like I said, your life will be significantly easier if you are able to overcome that hurdle and actually listen to the information on an intellectual level. And I'll go on to, we'll do one more of these because I find it interesting. We might do both of these two. I think, the last two here, because they are the last two. States parties shall adopt and implement appropriate measures to prohibit any exploitation or degradation of women. And state parties shall adopt and implement appropriate measures to ensure the protection of every woman's right to respect for her dignity and protection dignity and protection of women from all forms of violence, particularly sexual and verbal violence. Verbal violence. I love that term. Like, that doesn't exist. That's like online gender-based violence, right? Verbal violence is not a thing. The verbal rudeness is a thing. Verbal abuse is a thing. But not all abuse is violent. Just like not all violence is abuse. Defending yourself against somebody else's violence is not abuse. If it's not a physical assault on your body, it's not violence. You're not physically injured by it. You do have emotional responses to it, but verbal violence you can just walk away from. So, in any case, I want you to think about this, because these two things are kind of related, especially in the context of the previous one, the free development of your personality. Right? Women are entitled, according to this, to free development of any type of personality. It doesn't say any limitations there. So a woman can be an absolute fucking cunt, right? And just treat you like absolute shit. Engage in verbal violence towards you, according to what they would call verbal violence if you did it to them. Talk down to you, treat you like a presumed predator or threat, and or like you're dirty and beneath them. Not respect your right to dignity. Can exploit you for unpaid labor. Can degrade you. And this is an interesting one. Prohibit any degradation. There are things that we do in my industry. I'm a caregiver. I've been a state-tested nurse's aide before that worked in nursing homes, and I'm currently a direct support professional for intellectually disabled adults. And in both of those industries, there are some people who do not have bladder control, or they have varying degrees of incontinence, and they have to wear protective undergarments for bladder leakage or incontinence, depending on what level they have. And when you provide this type of protection to an infant who has not developed control over their urination or defecation, it's called a diaper. And diapers are for babies, right? So if you work in a nursing home or a care home and you have similar adult-sized protective undergarments, we don't call them diapers, because diapers are for babies. And to protect the dignity of adults who are in that circumstance, their health has deteriorated or they never developed continence, they're called various things like briefs or protective undergarments or other terms that essentially describe them as just undergarments that people are wearing. And a lot of times, standard undergarments will be worn over them if they look too diaperish, so that the individual doesn't feel treated like a baby. And a lot of these garments are now made to look more like standard non-protective undergarments. And in fact, there are now washable cloth ones that are made specifically to be worn just like any other undergarment, in order to protect the dignity and to make the individual not feel degraded simply because they have a health condition. Right? But when society deals with men and women on something like this, they deal with them differently. So we'll switch from incontinence to insolvency, economic insolvency. So if a woman is insolvent and she becomes homeless as a result, everything in the world is done to protect her dignity. She's offered space in shelters, and there are services to try to find her a job, to try to assist her in getting disability if she can't get it, can't work. If she has a mental illness, to get her into rehab if she has an addiction, and to generally get her out of that situation. In the case of women that simply cannot be removed from that situation, to protect them from harm while preserving their dignity. But if men are in that situation, they are criminalized, they are demonized, they are stigmatized, and they're often ignored. Right? People will literally step over them in the street. People will assault them for being in the way, or assume that they are a threat and assault them preemptively. People will steal from them. People will give them half-eaten food that they couldn't finish, and like, well, you're homeless, go ahead and eat after some stranger that already took bites out of this sandwich. Right? If they want shelter, they have to hope that there's not so many women with or without children, or men with children wanting use of that shelter, that there's no room for them. If they have an addiction, it's treated as willful. If they have any kind of criminal background or any mental health condition, it's treated as a reason why they should be kicked out of whatever neighborhood they're in and sent somewhere else. But not, to have their health care covered, or to receive disability acquirement assistance and things like that. It's just, this guy has to be dealt with, disposed of. Very much they're degraded and dehumanized. If a guy is a social reject, like he's maybe awkward, maybe he has unattractive looks, maybe he has a disability that makes him unattractive, he doesn't earn very much money, whatever, and he speaks to women, he gets degraded by being treated as trash under their feet. He gets degraded by being lumped in with violent people that he has no association with. He gets degraded by being treated as a disposable human being. And, have you ever seen a dignified looking perp walk? Have you ever seen a dignified looking treatment of a man who is being removed from someplace because other people are uncomfortable to be around him? A man being thrown out in a dignified manner?
Well, Trump, maybe.
His mugshot was dignified. His mugshot was stellar, right? But when you have a situation, for instance, where people decide that some guy has to be thrown out of a park because he smells bad, because he hasn't had an opportunity to bathe, no access to a shelter, no access to any kind of bathing facilities beyond being able to wash up in a public bathroom for weeks or months. Like it never looks dignified when the cops come and pressure him to leave. Right? But women have a right to dignity and freedom from degradation, respect for her dignity, protection from all forms of violence, all forms. Right? Do men have protection from all forms of violence? How many of you have a selective service card? If you're from the United States and you're an adult, you probably do, if you're male. Are you protected from all forms of violence if the government can yank you out of your life at any moment because they decided to go to war? You protected from all forms of violence if you're with your girlfriend in a theater and some nut job comes in and starts shooting up the place? Whose job is it to protect your girlfriend at the risk of his own life? Who will be publicly shamed by the entire nation no matter what the circumstances if he fails to protect a woman in danger and the news reports on it?
The guy who shot up the place. Heavens no. Heavens to Betsy no. Heavens to Murgatroyd no.
And how often, when a male educator or a male mentor in an organization or a male authority in an institution sexually exploits or assaults a female underling, inmate, student, someone under his authority, someone under his influence, how often do you hear people respond to that news story by going, nice? Never, right? I've never heard a single instance, even if the assailant or exploiter is attractive conventionally. The minute that someone reports this individual sexually exploited even an adult woman under his authority or under his mentorship, right? He's definitely persona non gratis. Right? But what do we hear over and over again when it's a female teacher in her 20s sexually exploiting a junior high school boy?
Nice.
Yeah. I wish I had teachers like that when I was in school. Dude, no, you do not. You don't want to be 14 times more likely to commit suicide or 44 times more likely to abuse illicit substances. You don't want to be more likely to get confused about your sexuality and not be sure if you're gay or straight. You don't want to be more likely to engage in criminal activity, more likely to sexually assault someone when you grow up. You don't want to be more likely to fail at your relationships. Right? But we hear that all the time. Oh, that kid was lucky. No, that kid is a rape victim.
That kid had his boundaries crossed. And then he goes on to wonder, what if I crossed some boundaries myself? Oh, no, I'm in solitary confinement for the rest of my life. Oh, well. It's a good thing I wasn't, or I would go on to become one of those infamous fucking serial murderers that Netflix seems so obsessed with at this point.
Yeah. Or he grows up to be somebody's pay pig for the rest of his life because he doesn't know how to defend his boundaries. And he doesn't know how to relate to women other than in a transactional manner. Right? And there are a lot more pay pigs out there than there are rapists. And yeah, how many forms of violence are men protected from? Oh, it depends on whether or not there's a woman around when the violence is happening. If there's a woman around when the violence is happening, the answer is none, 0. He can't even run away. He can't leave, right? And if there's any kind of legal action in response to the violence, the victim of that violence, even if the violent assailant attacked the man and he defended himself and the woman, and he was the one who suffered all the injuries, she's the victim, right? Even if he ends up in the hospital, he might be the hero, but he never is treated like the victim. Yeah, Richard Beer, that's a great example. Mary Kay Letourneau married her victim. And it wasn't until after she had passed away that he started to realize just how fucked up their relationship was and how it might have affected him. And it takes years sometimes for victims of childhood sexual assault to come to terms with the full nature of what happened to us and how it changed us. And a lot of us go through that period of trying to justify what happened or rationalize it wasn't that bad, or I'm not a victim, or I had agency when no, you did not. You were underage. You were, like, in my case, I was 5. In his case, he was like 13. The worst time for a boy, because everything is all out of whack. Your hormones have gone off the charts. You have no idea what you're dealing with in life, and everything, the way that everything in your body works has suddenly started changing, and it's all very confusing. And that's what that woman stepped into and took advantage of.
Maybe this is a good time to finally say our RIPs to Aaron Pitsey, who, well, we've been told in the last day or so has finally been rested at peace. But we were told this a few days ago, and we weren't sure. We were sure it was true at the time, and now we're being told is the case. So I don't know if it's true or not, but I guess, given the timeline of things, we might be able to say R.I.P. Aaron Pitsey, and to pay tribute to what she's been trying to tell us as a civilization across the Anglosphere and indeed the world.
Yeah.
That these things happen generationally. These things happen from household to household, and they will keep happening from household to household until we recognize that the women are just as prone to violence as men are, and until we acknowledge this pretty obvious fact, it's going to keep happening as long as we only punish men for what women have done to them, while while neglecting to punish women, even in the advent of what men have done. It's just going to keep getting worse.
They don't even help men get out of those situations. Like,
no, exactly.
In fact, when men try to get out of those situations, they get punished for that too. Yeah. So, they're unable to, like, when a woman wants to get out of an abusive situation and she is the victim, the state bends over backwards, or even if she says she's the victim, even if she's not, state bends over backwards to make sure she has custody of the children, she gets child support, she gets property in the division of marital property, that she isn't economically disadvantaged in any way that they can prevent her from being economically disadvantaged by her obligation to extract herself from the abusive relationship. But when a man tries to extract himself from an abusive relationship, the state bends over backwards to give his abuser custody of the children, to make sure that his abuser is not economically disadvantaged by his extraction of himself from her abusive environment that she's created for him, and that his abuser gets property from the division of property in the marital dissolution. They don't do anything to protect the abuse victim. He doesn't even have a protected right to see his children. He doesn't have a protected right to any defense against economic hardship, and can be forced to pay support to his abuser after he has left the relationship. So it is quite a terrible situation for men.
Next thing on the agenda. next thing on the agenda, gentlemen, once you're quite done with the immigrant problem, can we do away with the Duluth model? This might sound like something that only affects Duluth, or something that only affects Illinois. Is that where Duluth is? Or something that only affects the USA?
Minnesota.
And something that Minnesota. Something that only affects
I think that's
like
right.
the entire Western world as it's infected all of it. Can we do away with that? Again, like we it seems like we're only clipping the leaves of this poison ivy when we could be clipping the seeds. And it didn't start in Duluth. Well, I guess it did. But
it didn't start in Duluth. Duluth is what made it policy. The fact that it was policy started in Duluth.
Indeed. And that's a policy that we should really rip out at the fucking roots.
Yeah.
Because that's where so much of this shit started.
Yeah. The other thing is, before there was research that demonstrated this, Aaron Pitsey recognized the fact that being subjected to abuse in like childhood violence, like in an abusive violent environment, growing up in an environment like that, changes your structure of your brain. That it affects your hormones and your neurochemicals, your neurotransmitters, and she recognized. Mike, your microphone is staticky. All of a sudden, there we go. But she recognized that it does physical damage, not just in the moment where there are bruises. There it goes again. So it's like it's not plugged in properly or something. But she also recognized that it ages you, that it causes permanent, like the stress causes permanent problems. And it was years later, actually, when they started recognizing that when you are raised in an environment like that, where you are scared all the time, that cortisol, the stress hormone, causes a bunch of changes in your system. And that then later on, there was another recognition that the cushy ends of your chromosomes, when they, you have your cells replicate and they copy the DNA, the little bits of the cushy ends drop off, and that's part of how you age. That's part of what causes aging. Abuse shortens those, so you have less cushion, so it ages you. These are all things that Aaron explained in less scientific terms years before they were explained in scientific terms. She observed these things in real life and tried to warn people. And it took that long for, the rest of the world to catch up. She was ahead of the curve on things like this, what we're talking about tonight. She was talking about the UN, and in particular UN Women, well before any of the rest of us were. Like, she really was ahead of the curve on everything. And, as I said on Tuesday, if you haven't, you should look up her name on YouTube, and watch videos of her interviews, and the historical videos of her working at the refuge that she started. There it goes. Okay, like that just keeps going off. But you have to see for yourself, or if you follow me on X, scroll back through my posts on my main page, and you should be able to see my posts of YouTube videos of Aaron. Just avoid posts by the ex-patriarch. I didn't repost any of those, but like, that guy's full of shit, and nothing that he has to say is of any value. But everything else like the direct videos of Aaron speaking and Aaron working, and the women that Aaron worked with talking about their experiences and about the refuge and everything. That information is something that should not be lost. So I would love to see people, go and watch those and learn about her. There was also a website, I believe it was called honestribbon.org, that was created to correct some misstatements by whiteribbon.org, because Aaron looked through that, and their stuff is absolutely not factual. So yeah, Aaron was a hell of a woman. And yeah, our man mentioned man-woman myth. The man-woman myth documentary on YouTube is amazing. That's a great place to start. I know we had her on a fireside chat. I tweeted that. I posted that on X as well. So and she's had a lot of videos where she was talking to Dean Esme when he was involved with A Voice for Men, and she did a lot of work with A Voice for Men, a lot of work with the National Coalition for Men, a lot of work in Canada with men's organizations. She did work with Cafe. She did anything that she could to try to get people to understand. Yeah, telomeres, Richard Beer. I didn't know if I said that, but to get people to understand what really needs to happen in order to reduce and maybe ultimately eliminate the phenomenon of domestic violence. Like that would, if people had listened to her, that would already be well on its way. So in the meantime, let me see if we have, I don't know if we've had any super chows since Meredith. I don't think we have. So, and I didn't see any super chats go through or any Rumble rants. So I'm going to call it. We are at the end of the episode. Next week, we'll look at some of the other rights that these women think that men already have and women don't. So just on your own, maybe comment under the video ways in which some of these rights that we talked about tonight that women are demanding, that if you've got examples demonstrating that men don't have those rights or that those rights are not protected, go ahead and share them. Things that have happened to people things that have happened to you, things that you've witnessed. Like the things that I talked about, you can always respond to that. Especially like I'm curious to hear what other guys think of that incident at the hospital, because the day that I heard that, the day that he came in and he was traumatized. And we just sat and talked. There wasn't really much else to do about that. And I was just completely floored. Nobody ever has asked me to do anything even remotely like that because I'm a woman. And I can't imagine what it must have been like for him standing in that doorway, looking out at an angry outburst from the community in the form of dozens of people flocking around just that one doorway. And the whole building being surrounded by yelling, angry people. And, knowing that the only thing that he had in his possession to stop anyone from getting past him if they were to break in through that door were his bare hands.
If anyone's wondering if we're going to keep doing UN Women forever, I mean, as long as UN Women exists, that's a very real possibility.
It could be. We were going to be doing women's suffrage history forever too, and we're on a break from that. We're going to be doing federal funding forever, and we're on a break from that. We should
keep doing this until
your point.
We should keep doing this until both of these things stop existing. I mean, the UN in general should stop existing, but it should start with UN Women. And hopefully, once UN Women stops existing, the UN in itself will disintegrate and collapse, as it very well probably would and probably should, because that's always been what it's about. The devil presents itself with a pretty face. That's the warning with which we've presented, with which has been presented this whole time. And that's why so many people think the UN is the devil, because it is. And that's why so many people think the devil will present itself with a female face, because the female face is the most neotenic. Neotenic, is that right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. In any case, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Mike, for going through this with me, and Brian for working in the background to make sure that we're able to do this, and everybody else that works to make HBR Talk happen. Remember, next week, due to circumstances in my life, HBR Talk will be on Tuesday night, and HBR News will be on Thursday night. So it'll be the show will be at 7 p.m. on Tuesday and 6 p.m. on Thursday Eastern Standard Time, and I can't remember what that is GMT. So what it is in the UK, because that's the one that everybody goes by.
It's either 11 or 12, something like that.
So, well, what time was it when we started? What time was it where you were when we started?
It was midnight usually on Thursdays.
So midnight GMT for HBR Talk on Tuesday, and then it'll be 11 p.m. GMT for HBR News on Thursday. So that's 2 different times. There we go. So you guys have it, and then the following week we'll go back to normal. But that way, it just a bunch of stuff has occurred, including mandatory training that I have to go through. That's just an annual thing if you work in my profession, and it's limited when it can be done. So thanks for all of that, and good night, all.
See you next cunt.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.